Let's get started. So hi, my name is Sakshee Jain. I am going to go to UT Austin. So some things that I did in high school was that I was very involved with my school's debate team. I was part of FBLA, and I also got a teaching certificate in yoga and meditation. So with that, I started my own business as well as I taught Alzheimer's residents.
Hello, everybody. My name is Neer Jain, and I'm also going to UT at the Macomb School of Business. And in high school, I spent the majority of my time doing speech and debate as well. But aside from speech and debate, I would say I spent a lot of time volunteering and doing internships that surrounded things such as engineering or political activism.
So I think Vani is not able to join currently because of network issues, but another one of our webinar panelists will be Vani. She's also attending UT, and she was really involved in student council, Comet, tennis, FBLA, and then she received many awards, such as the President's Award for Outstanding Academic Excellence.
Hi everyone, my name is Sanemi and I'll also be a freshman at UT McCombs. In high school, I was actively involved in varsity orchestra. I was also involved in DECA, and this year I was a US Presidential Scholar Program candidate, and now I run my own business as a violin teacher and perform gigs time to time.
So as you guys read over the brief agenda, I just want to let you know that throughout our presentation, if you guys have any questions, be sure to drop them down in the chat box. And we have someone named Ms. Jigisha Doshi, she is a college counselor. And so she will try to, address as many questions as she can. And some of them she'll be saving for the Q&A session that is towards the end of the webinar. Along with that, just a disclaimer that everything we're talking about today is based on our personal experiences, and everyone else could have completely unique experiences. We just want to share whatever we have learned throughout the year. So as we get started, first we need to look at a college application process as a timeline, right? So you really need to think about it as a culmination of things you have done over the 4 years. So we can start off with 9th grade, where you're first introduced to high school, and your main priorities should be keeping up your grades as well as your extracurriculars. So something to note is that grades are really important in a college admissions process, just because they're the first thing an officer looks at to even get you, towards the later part of your application. So you really want to keep maintaining your grades throughout your 4 years of high school and challenge yourselves as much as possible. Another thing you really need to focus on in 9th grade especially is to get involved with extracurriculars and find something that you are willing to do for all 4 years of high school. So colleges really like to see, commitment to something. And you really want to be committed to a task you've been doing, such as either debate, FBLA, tennis, orchestra, anything you want to be committed for the 4 years. Then in 10th grade, you want to keep up your grades, keep up your extracurriculars, but then but another new thing will be the PSAT. Obviously, it's more practice in 10th grade than an actual test to determine, financial aid. But, the PSAT is still important and a good judgment of where you could be in the future. Now, as you can see in the 11th period, that's where things start culminating, right? Because you have to focus on standardized test scores. You might start doing college visits, rec letters, choosing a major, scholarships, application just in general. So you really want everything to start culminating together in 11th grade, and especially your extracurriculars. I really need to stress that in 11th grade, that's when you should have the spike. Either you go to nationals or, you're a renowned violinist, something that you can prove that all your dedication for these past 2 years has led to something a lot bigger and a lot, makes you a lot better person. So this is the timeline pre-application. So now let's get into what it looks like when the
Sakshi, I just wanted to add something really quickly to what you said. You talked about like grades and GPAs and keeping your grades up. I just wanted to remind everyone that this doesn't necessarily mean that you want to take the easiest classes offered by your high school or classes intentionally to keep your grades high, because things such as course rigor are also really important for colleges. So making sure that you're taking AP classes if your school offers AP classes, and you're putting yourself through a schedule that's difficult and it shows that you're able to accept a challenge.
Yeah, like Neer said, you don't want to get an A in an academic class because it's easy. If you can take the pre-AP or AP class, and even if you get a lower grade, it still looks like you tried a lot harder and tried to focus a lot more. Now let's move on to the Common App.
So with the Common App, it's basically a centralized location where you can apply for many different schools if they accept Common App applications. So the first steps of the Common App is obviously creating and adding colleges to your account. So you can see that I put at the bottom a good summary of the Common App, but since the Common App opened yesterday, I urge everybody after this webinar is over to go there, make an account, go to the Add Colleges and Search Colleges tab, and go through a bunch of colleges that you are interested in, even if you haven't done as much research on them, just so you have some sort of list of colleges that you are interested in and want to do more research for. And then the next step would be connecting it to Naviance or whatever platform your school uses. Essentially, what this does is it gives a centralized location for your counselors as well as your college counselor to put things such as your transcripts, recommendation letters for your teachers. Having that centralized location is really important, and it makes it very easy for your counselors to help you get all your stuff in before the deadline is over. So I would urge you guys to contact whoever it is at your school that you would consider to be like the major assistant in the college application process, and ask them if you have to connect it to Naviance or if you have to connect it to some sort of other platform. And then the third thing is navigating the Common App. You need to know about early decision, restrictive early action, as well as early action. So these are three different ways in addition to regular decision that you can apply to a college. So early decision is a binding application that you have to submit to a school by a deadline that's usually around November 1st, and you'll get your result back in mid to late December. And what binding means is that if you get accepted into that school, you have to go to that school. And it also means that you can only early decision to that one school. So for example, if I wanted to early decision to Dartmouth, I would not be able to early decision to any other school. That would be the only school I'm allowed to apply to by November 1st, unless I'm early actioning. So that takes me to the second one of restrictive early action. So restrictive early action is the exact same as early decision. However, you're not obligated to go to that school if you get accepted into that school by restrictive early action. So an example of this is Stanford. Stanford accepts restrictive early action students. This means you're not allowed to early decision or restrictive early action to any other school except for Stanford if you do choose it. And you'll get your results back for your application by December before regular decision is over. However, you cannot, if you do get in, you don't have to go there. It's not binding. And then the last one is early action, which is essentially you apply to a school early, you get your results early, and you're allowed to early action to as many schools as you want. So an example of an application could be you early decision to Dartmouth, and then you early action to multiple different schools. If you got into Dartmouth, you would have to go there. However, if you didn't get in and you got into one of your early action schools, you have the choice of going to that school. It's not binding. So early action, you can do it to as many schools. You can do it alongside early decision and restrictive early action. However, it's not binding. And the last thing to keep in mind is that there's lots of places with specific applications, things such as Applied Texas, as well as the UCs, and schools such as MIT and Stanford have their own separate application portals. So you should look into that as well if you want to apply to schools there. So the next question that a lot of people ask is about standardized testing, whether or not they should take the SAT versus ACT, what are subject tests. So I wanted to preface this by saying that standardized testing is going to look very different from each year going forward, starting this year. It's due to things such as obviously coronavirus, but also because of the fact that schools are now being more friendly towards test optional policies. They feel like the SAT and ACT should not take as much of a weight in college applications anymore. So that's just something to keep in mind, that before you apply to a school, check what their policy is on standardized testing. Do they even accept scores? Do they care about scores? And whether or not they're doing it specifically for this year, since COVID-19 has caused a lot of colleges to completely cancel standardized testing as a whole. But aside from all that, just a few brief notes is that there's a chart here with the differences between the SAT and the ACT. Some students find one test a lot easier than the other. So I urge you guys to take practice tests and do that sort of discovery for yourself, so you can find out whether or not you're better suited for the SAT or ACT. The second is subject tests. These are basically tests that are only for specific subjects to gauge how well you've learned that subject. It's sort of like you've taken an AP test for chemistry. However, this is College Board's way of also testing your chemistry, so you can send that score to your colleges. So subject tests are no different. You should probably take them alongside standardized tests. However, make sure you're actually paying attention to whether or not the schools want them. Some schools only want specific subject tests and they don't want any other subject tests. So it's important to keep that in mind as well. Which subject tests should you be taking? And the last thing is, how should you study? So I have 3 points here that are honestly really basic. It's just repetition, doing lots of practice tests, and pacing yourself. These are honestly the only 3 ways you can study for a standardized test. And the best part about standardized tests is that each test has the exact same questions. It's just asking about a different topic. So the questions are formatted exactly the same. Once you've learned the formatting of the test, it's very easy to know based on whatever passage they give you, how you should be approaching that question. Obviously, every test is different. However, the way the questions are asked are the exact same. So if you're able to do that sort of recognition before you go into the testing room with practice tests, then you should be in a really good spot. And that brings me to pacing, which is that these tests are timed and you have to be kind of fast. For example, the SAT reading section is 52 questions in 60 minutes. So that leaves you with not that much time per question. This means you have to know for each passage, how much time should I be taking reading the passage? How much time should I be taking on the questions? That sort of pacing is really important, and you need to make sure you're up to board on that. And the last thing is resources. I've listed a few resources that are really good for standardized testing. You can look on Amazon for any books from like Princeton Review or other companies that create SAT practice books, but also Khan Academy and College Board have a lot of free resources that I urge you guys to check out first. Next is teacher recommendations. So first off is, how important are your teacher recommendations? I would say that teacher recommendations are at least 15 to 20% of your application, which means it's a huge make or break with your application. It is not something that you can slip by with an average teacher recommendation. It's usually something that colleges look at very heavily after your academics and core extracurriculars. So it's very important that you know how to select teacher recommendations. So how should you be picking your teachers? So the first 2 things are that you should ideally pick junior year teachers or teachers that have known you for multiple years. For example, they taught you freshman year and they taught you again junior year. And second is that you need to pick teachers that you have a personal relationship with. So this is really important because the teachers need to be able to speak on your behalf at a level that is above the average. They can't just say that you were a good student that was like getting A's in their class and whatnot. They need to be able to speak on your character, how you are as a person in the classroom and as an intellectual, because that's what colleges are really looking for. How is a student going to perform in our environment? How are they going to add to our unique community? The third point is STEM versus English or history. So a lot of colleges, and not all obviously, require you to have one teacher recommendation from a teacher that teaches you either math or science, and another teacher recommendation that comes from a teacher who is an English teacher or a history teacher. So this is really important because it means that if you're a student who's very strong at math and science, that means that you cannot allow yourself to underperform in other classes just by saying or thinking that, I can get my 2 recommendations from my math teachers and my science teachers, because they want to see that you're a well-rounded student. Even if your grades don't necessarily show that, it's about your personality in the classroom. You don't have to be the strongest English student and write the best timed writings in order for a teacher to be impressed by your character and the way you present yourself in class. And the next 2 points are the extracurricular recs as well as peer recs. So I'll start with extracurricular recs. These are basically recommendations from people who have given you an internship, or somebody who might have been like your debate coach or your swim coach. people who have like impacted in your lives outside of your core classes. So the first question is, should we have extracurricular recs? So I would say that you have to be really sure on whether or not you actually want these extracurricular recs, because they're not necessarily needed for applications. Oftentimes they're optional, which means that you need to really think and consider, is this rec going to add to my application? Because imagine if a counselor spends like 10 minutes reading your application. You only have X amount of things to show them. If you keep adding stuff, that takes away from other parts of your application. I.e., 4 recommendations would mean that each recommendation is less important as opposed to 3 recommendations. So in that way, it can hurt you if you submit too many recommendations, because it shifts their focus from the parts of your application that actually might matter more, or the parts that you want to highlight better. However, if you feel like this extra rec is really going to show a unique side of you and something that your teachers can't talk about, then I would say 100% submit that recommendation. And lastly is peer recommendations. Some colleges like Dartmouth ask for peer recommendation letters, which means that you need to be sure to think about like what friends are you going to ask, or how are you going to ask these sorts of like peers of yours to write recommendations from you, what you want them to say. That's just something to keep in mind that some people overlook. Now, the last 2 questions are when to ask and how to ask. So when to ask is at least 1 month in advance. Some students ask for their teacher recommendations in the summer before senior year. So their teachers are very well known ahead of time. They're known about like what students they want to write their recommendations for. They can even start them. And if they spend more time on your recommendation, it's probably going to be better. So I would ask very, very long in advance, because it gives your teachers the proper amount of time. And next is how to ask. So this is really important. What I would say is that first, definitely go up and have a face-to-face conversation with your teacher, asking them well ahead of time that you want a recommendation letter from that teacher. And second is to follow up that night or the next day with an email. If they say yes, provide your cover letter, provide your resume. And in a cover letter, a lot of people, so we're going to talk about resumes in a little bit, but for cover letters, it's essentially just a description of why you want that teacher to write your recommendation, and what school you're going to, what program you're going to, and maybe a few things you want the teacher to talk about. For example, let's say your school is has a heavy focus on interdisciplinary learning, people who can think and talk in ways that are multifaceted about different topics, and they care about your ability to do so. Then maybe mention that to your teacher, that this school really cares about this quality in a student, and if you could highlight that quality within me, that would be really helpful. So it's really important to provide this cover letter, schools, programs, as well as your resume, so your teacher can do something that's not generic and really show a different side of you. Also, I'm getting questions in the chat. I would urge you guys to either private message them to Jigisha Doshi, because she's going to compile the questions, or also just like say them in the all chat so that we can like look at them and go over them at the end.
Yeah, just one thing I want to add is, as Neer said, ideally, it would be great to talk to your teacher face to face. Obviously, with the COVID-19, many of us are not actually going to a face to face. So obviously, just email them. Email them, and something you talk to them face to face. Try to convey those emotions through the email.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I agree with Sakshee on that. And then the next thing is scholarships. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the 40-acre scholarship, especially because it's so large in Texas. This is an in-state scholarship that applies to many different schools. It's under the Texas Access Scholarship. So whether you're going to UT Austin, UT Arlington, UT Dallas, you should really do some research on what scholarships they offer, because oftentimes students can get very large amounts of money from their colleges for just filling out a very small application that's filled with things that you're gonna like write essays for anyway, like things like, what is your major? Why do you want to attend this school? The scholarships and colleges often ask very similar questions. So it's really good if you do that sort of research. So a few of them, for example, at UT Austin are the Terry Scholarship, UT For Me Scholarship, and the 40-acre Scholarship. So all of these scholarships offer like thousands of dollars to students if you apply. To apply, you just go on the Apply Texas portal. You can submit your application, and then it'll ask you, do you want to submit a Texas Access application as well? And sometimes you won't even have to write a lot of additional essays. It'll just submit your application to that scholarship as well. So it's basically applying for 2 things with the same exact essays and questions. However, the way that scholarships work is I would say they're a little bit more competitive in that when you write applications, they often have a few more essays because they know you're going to reuse essays. So an example of an essay prompt I got was name 3 people you'd invite to dinner with you from all of history. So you have to sort of be a little bit more creative with your answers. You have to think about why you're picking the person you are, and you only get like 200 words, which might sound like a lot, but it's definitely not a lot when you're writing. So, having that sort of like planning to have enough time to answer it, like submitting your college application early so you can get to the scholarship portal early is really good, as well as keeping in mind, that you have to be a little bit creative with your answers. And next is that teacher recs are also really important for scholarships. So everything I said on the last slide also applies to this slide, in that you have to ask your teachers ahead of time. You have to make sure that you're on top of those sorts of things. And lastly, I want to talk about is that scholarships have a lot of stages. So once you fill your application, oftentimes you'll go to the semifinalist stage, which might ask for things such as teacher recs. And then after the semifinalist stage, you might have to go to a finalist stage where you have to give interviews with the scholarship committee. And you might have to see them in person. Maybe this year it'll be held online. But scholarships have a lot of different layers. So making sure that you're prepared for each layer, know the answers to like generic questions. Everybody always asks generic questions because people feel like they're not going to be asked them. Things like, why are you majoring in X? Why do you want to go to this university? Have those answers thought out beforehand, and so that way you can give the best answers possible. And the few notable scholarships I wanted to talk about were Coca-Cola scholarships, the Burger King scholarships, the Elks Most Valuable Student Scholarship, Coolidge Foundation Scholarship, as well as the Presidential Scholars that Sanemi was a part of. And I also urge you guys to do your own research on scholarships, because when it comes to scholarships, it's definitely about quantity, not necessarily the quality of the scholarship. You don't have to apply to only scholarships that give like $50,000. I would urge you guys to apply to many small scholarships worth $2,000 or like $500, because these might feel like small sums, but they really add up together, and they're often less competitive. And it also doesn't hurt just to apply to more scholarships. So don't spend all your time doing a few scholarships. Diversify your scholarships and look for scholarships that might be more personal. For example, I applied to a scholarship that was a part of my mom's company. I also applied to many debate scholarships because I was a student in debate. So those sorts of things can give you an edge because you already have a personal connection to those scholarships. And use your counselors, use Naviance, do just like some basic research. So this is an example of a link I found just Googling Katy ISD scholarships. I found entire pages filled with scholarships. Every month there was like 100 scholarships. Just apply to all of them, and you can worry about the results later. And Naviance is also a really great tool because it has a way for you to input your information and then find scholarships that are the best for you based on whatever you've entered, based on your GPA, based on your grades and extracurriculars. It'll tell you scholarships that people are interested in.
Yeah, and just one thing to add is that don't like think that you can only apply to scholarships senior year, right? You can apply to scholarships. I know some of them you can apply at the age of 13. So if you guys are like, if you really need scholarships to go to college, like start applying very early, and there are plenty of them. So you'll probably get some of them.
Hi guys, so my name is Vani. Sorry I missed the intro. But basically, this is an example of my resume that I put here on the left side. And I'm just gonna give you a few notes on, what to do when you're creating your own resume. So the first thing I'd like to say is that you have to make sure the information in your header is present on every page of your resume. So it should have your full name, your address, your phone number, and your email, as you can see on mine. After that, anything you write afterwards must be in Times New Roman with a font of 12. Larger fonts are acceptable for headings, titles, anything that you want, people to look at first. The recommended order for your resume is this. Your education should come first with your GPA and your rank to the side. You should have your extracurricular activities next, athletics if you've participated in any, community service, and skills, talents, and achievements. As a follow-up, you should then have a maximum of 3 references. And these 3 references could be like your teachers, people that you volunteered for, for organizations, etc. Make sure you expand on each activity in the extracurriculars and athletics especially with at least 3 bullet points on what you did, how it helped you, how did you help the club, etc. For community service and skills, talents, and achievements, 1 thorough bullet point is enough. Just make sure you really show them, why you were participating in this club or how this club helped you or how did it, make a difference in your school. Lastly, you should write the timestamps for the time you were in high school, how long you were in the clubs, etc. The ones you've participated in the longest go first, which would be extracurriculars. While for your skills, talents, and achievements, you should put the ones that you've received or learned recently. So you can see on my left side over here, student council, I put that first because I participated in that for all 4 years. And then, it slowly goes down. You have community, my community outreach, I did that for 2 years, etc. So another couple notes on resumes. So while many colleges may not require a resume, it's always preferred to have one on hand. A lot of admissions officers are reviewing thousands of applications. So these resumes give them, a little they save them a little time in reviewing, who you are as a person. You should start building your resume in 9th grade so that you aren't rushing to cram information in later on. I made the mistake of starting in 11th, and I had a really hard time, putting in information at the last minute, or sometimes I would just remember in the middle of the night that I did this, and I would have to add it in. So a lot of students assume that the more packed their resume is, the higher chances there are for them to be chosen. And this is not at all the case. Just because, you have more activities done or, you had a lot of achievements that, you've gained, doesn't mean that people who are reviewing your applications will consider you first. Sometimes more is not that good. If you have less information, but that information is really influential, then you could be chosen over someone who has participated in a lot of activities. Do community service and be involved in things that you truly find meaningful and love. Not that you're doing it because others are or because you think it'll look good. The people who are reviewing your applications will see through your motives, and what was meant to help you may hurt you. Because these guys, they're very experienced in reviewing applications. They take about a minute max, in reviewing who you are. And even then, you should really try and make a difference.
And just something I want to stress is that we got a lot of questions on what extracurriculars do colleges like, and that's you can just see in us 4, we all did completely different things. We all were involved with different things, yet we still got into the same university. So what Vani is trying to stress is that don't do anything because a college would like it. Do it truly passionate about it and let that show through your resume.
Yeah. So again, this is kind of a nutshell of what Sakshee emphasized about extracurriculars. There's no set limit to how many clubs you can join, but of course you want to be careful about how many you take onto your plate because you also don't want to neglect your studies because of that. Be mindful to not join too many. You should join a max of 3 because that's how you can really shine. If the fewer you are active in, the more you can make a difference in that club that you're in because you can spare more time for it. Identify what you want to achieve and stick with it. If you have a goal that you really want to achieve in this club that matches your mission statement, then that would be also very helpful for your applications because you're doing something that you really love. For example, you could become a leader, be an officer, show how passionate you are about the club, make a difference, be the reason why people want to join, and many more. Don't feel pressure to join something, like I said before, because your friends are doing it or because this college, just because, let's just say, for example, a college is centered around business, right? You don't need to join a business club to make a difference. You can join any club and, just show how passionate you are about it. And if you weren't involved in any extracurriculars, make up for it. If your academic standings, right? For example, if they're not enough, if you think that your transcript does not show who you are, right, then you can, join a lot of extracurricular activities and show it through that. and vice versa. If you aren't involved in any extracurriculars, you could show that through your essay writing, your testing, your academics, all that kind of stuff. So, key pieces of genuine advice that I wish I knew. SAT scores. Even if your test or class results don't reflect how hard you've worked, there are ways to make up for it. Like Neer said, repetition for SAT is a big thing. The more you repeat, taking these tests, the faster you'll improve on how you can approach each question, and that's how you'll save time when you're testing for them. Your GPA and your rank. Yes, your GPA is important, and so is your rank. But remember, numbers aren't everything. For me, I did not have the best numbers to show on my transcript, but I showed, a different side of me through my essay writing and the kind of extracurricular activities that I joined. Writing your essays and your short answers. Don't be discouraged if you can't think of anything or you feel that your writing is terrible, because you're going to keep rewriting your essay and your short answers. Not your first time won't be perfect. Don't be afraid of having the option to rewrite again and again. Clubs and athletics, don't join what you can't handle and don't feel pressured to join. Just do it according to you. Go with your flow. Applications, start on them as soon as possible. You don't want to wait till the end. I know a couple of my peers, they started, in October when the deadline was coming up for some of these colleges. And they really, really struggled with, handing everything in on time and making sure everything was in order like that. So start early, start as soon as you can.
Okay, so now that we've moved away from the application as a whole, there are two different ways that you can apply to a university. You can either apply to out-of-state schools or in-state schools. With me personally, I only applied to 2 in-state schools, A&M and UT, and I pretty much essentially made all my other schools out-of-state, which is I think about 10. So just managing the time for each of those schools, right? Managing this deadline, this interview, you really need to be on top of that, especially because if you're applying to applying to multiple schools, because deadlines are different. Some people need interviews. So for me personally, what really helped is a planner. I knew exactly when I needed to submit my application, when I needed to start my application, how much time in between I had. I left approximately about two weeks for each application, where I could review the essays multiple times and then get feedback and edit. So like I said before, I applied to about 12 to 15 universities, and how I decided what universities I should apply for specifically is that I looked for the specific major that I wanted to go to, and then the best schools fit for that major. So I was really leaning towards finance and entrepreneurship. So I almost applied to all the top finance and the top entrepreneurships programs out there. I know that Neer specifically wanted to do a lot of business plus engineering. So he applied to schools that were strong in both business and engineering. For example, at Berkeley, there's the MET program, right? That combines both of them. So you just do research on, what programs you are best interested in and what universities have them. Obviously, college tours are very beneficial in deciding, is the university a good fit for you? For example, I did a college tour in the East Coast, and I visited schools such as Princeton, and I realized that Princeton is very research heavy, and they all focus on their senior thesis. And for me personally, that's not something I wanted to do during my college years. So I knew that Princeton for me wasn't the right fit. So obviously college tours are beneficial, and if you can do a college tour, go for it, because the more you learn about a university, the more you realize, is it going to be your home or not, right? Because at the end of the day, the college name doesn't matter as much, because you are calling it home. And do you want that program or that school to be your home? Something to note is that for some universities, you don't automatically get into your major. you might get into the undergrad School of Natural Sciences, and then you have to apply into your major. I know that, a business, people think that when you apply into a business school, you automatically choose finance or MIS or something like that. No, we're all applying as undergraduate business students, and then we get into our major, or we declare our major later on. Something I didn't really know about, which I wish I knew, was demonstrated interest. So many universities want you to show demonstrated interest if you're applying to that university. So whether that be do a college tour, do an interview, talk to alumni. I know that schools such as WashU and Rice really, really look at demonstrated interest. Like on your college application, they will see, did this person show interest in my school or not? And they'll weigh you, because obviously, they don't want to accept someone who doesn't even want to go to their university. So they'll weigh you on how much demonstrated interest you showed. Something to note is that all out-of-state schools, you will be paying a higher tuition because you aren't the resident of the school. So whether that be public or private, but obviously in a private school, you'll be paying the same tuition regardless of if you're in-state or out-of-state. And for me personally, that was my make or break for my out-of-state schools. So I got into, a couple of out-of-state schools, but they were all out of my comfort in paying for that tuition. So I just decided to go undergrad in-state. So obviously it's up to you to decide, how much does financial aid matter to you, and if you're willing to get that from that out-of-state program that you are applying to. Now, something to note is interviews, right? So most out-of-state schools that at least I applied to had an interview, or they allowed interviews to be optional. Whenever they give you a chance to take an interview, take it. Especially now during COVID-19, where most of you guys will not be submitting your SAT or ACT. Make sure you take the interview because you want it to show another side of your college application. So oftentimes people think that interviews are very nerve-wracking and that, you'll come into a room and you'll just be asked a bunch of questions. And that's absolutely not true. In fact, most interviews are very relaxed. The alumni wants to know exactly why do you want to go to the school and if you'll be a good fit for the school. For me personally, most of my interviews were in cafes where I would just come meet the alumni. They would share their story and exactly how, the university influenced them. But also they'd ask, why do I want to come to this university? Why do I think I'm a good choice for this university? So obviously they want to learn about you, but this is also a chance for them to give back to you on whatever they've learned. So use interviews as a chance to not only, you showcase a part of your application, but also learn from them on whether this should be your home or not. It all goes down to, do you like the university or not? Something I want to note is that interviews, you really want to talk about a spike that you had in your high school career. But me personally, in my opinion, I don't think you should talk about something you've already mentioned in your essays. So if your long essay is about meditation and your short essay is about meditation, you don't want your entire interview to be about meditation. You want it to include something that you have never talked about, so that the college admissions officer can get a holistic perspective on who you are as a person. And then finally, make sure you enter every single interview with a set of questions. Okay, you really have to ask, it's an almost form of interest. If someone is giving you information, ask questions to learn more about the university. But something I think you should never do is ask generic questions. How was the weather there? Or, did you enjoy this program? No, ask questions that will actually benefit you and things that they will need to think about. The more, thought-provoking your questions are, the better it could help your chances into getting into the university, or at least, getting your point across that you genuinely care about the school. So interviews, especially from this year onwards, interviews are very important, and make sure you take any chance you can to schedule one for your prospective college.
So this is like a little like rule thing about in-state. And so what happens in-state is that the 6% rule is applicable to most schools in Texas. But for example, Texas A&M has the 10% rule. And what this means is that the top, like if you're in part of the top 6% in your school, then you can automatically get into these schools. But it is important to note that while you may get in automatically, you may not be able to get into your preferred major as well. So like you could get into UT, but you could not, like, you might not be able to make it into McCombs or the College of Liberal Arts or etc. If you aren't in the top 6%, don't worry. Your extracurriculars, essay writing, they could just be just as amazing. And you could still get in because the whole process is a holistic review. For October to November applications, ideally you want to finish by October 1st because schools like Texas A&M have rolling admissions, which means that if you're submitting your application in November, chances are that you won't get in. This is because all the seats fill up with all the people who've applied earlier. So a key difference between UT Austin and A&M is that UT doesn't have rolling admissions. So that's like, kind of like a pro if you're kind of late in starting your applications.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm going to be talking about short answer questions and basically just the entire writing part of your application. So I'll first start off by saying that what are short answer questions? These are questions that are open-ended and they're going to require you to create a short yet impactful response. With these type of questions, you're going to have a limited amount of words that you can write. So the most challenging part is making sure that every word and sentence is meaningful and is important to the story that you're telling. So a tip that I have is that basically with any writing, whether it's for your personal statement, essay, or SAQ, you have to answer the question of how. So phrases like orchestra has impacted me in many positive ways, or playing water polo has made me a better person. They aren't going to help get that message across to the reader. So instead, you're going to have to ask yourself, how exactly has orchestra impacted me? And, how are you a better person? You want to provide more details as to why that activity is meaningful to you. And so just some common questions with SAQs, rewrites. So everyone's mind and process of writing is obviously different, right? Like for me, I took a lot of time to brainstorm on how I wanted to answer SAQs. And then when I kind of narrowed down my topic, I didn't need to rewrite. So I just wrote it and I made a couple edits and that was it. But obviously that's not going to be the case for everyone. Some of you may need to rewrite multiple times and that's completely normal. Like don't stress about that. Okay, how to know that you're done. So the truth is, you're never really done with writing. You're always going to get new ideas and things that you think would make your writing more interesting. So a trick is to have someone read your response and see if they can write a small blurb about what they just read that covers the main points that you really wanted to showcase in your writing. And then that could mean that you're done. And critiques, you really want to take the help of literally everyone around you. If you know people that are in college or even going to the college that you're applying to with that specific piece of writing, just ask them to edit and make reviews. You want to also ask any teachers at school. They've got great opinions, even English teachers. Personally, I went a lot to the writing lab at my school and I got the help of this one English teacher. She helped me a lot because you really want to be able to receive various perspectives on your writing and just to see what you can improve because you're applying to a university, right? And some of these universities might, be your dream schools. So you want to make sure that you're trying your best. And another one is why this university prompts. So a lot of colleges are going to ask you, why do you want to come here? What's so special about us? Like, why this college? So big tip with this is don't write about the school's location or, the weather there or their high rankings, common traditions. They already know all of that, right? You want to give a very personal response. They're going to look for thorough knowledge about the school. So you really need to do your research on the school. Maybe read some student reviews, contact a student that goes there. And so maybe you could write information about a specific program regarding the major you're applying for, or mention specific organizations that you want to join and talk about how you want to make a change in it. So basically, when you're formatting this type of question, you want to provide like a school-related detail, maybe an organization or something, and then explain how it connects back to you. Yeah. Okay, I wanted to show you all an example of a short answer question. This is one of my UT SAQs from last year. And so the prompt was, please share how you believe your experiences, perspectives, and/or talents have shaped your ability to contribute to and enrich the learning environment at UT Austin, both in and out of the classroom. So I decided to focus on the experiences part, and that's another tip I would like to give. If it says experiences, perspectives, and/or talents, I would suggest focusing on one part because you really don't want your response to kind of go in different directions. So I'm just going to give you guys a quick minute to read through it before I talk about it. Okay, so since we are kind of running short on time, I'm just going to talk about it. Maybe we're close to getting to the end. But so you can tell with my short answer that it's pretty straightforward, like how all SEQs should be. You really don't want to beat around the bush, just get straight into the point because you do have a limited amount of words that you can write. So with the first paragraph, I really wanted to set the scene. I wanted to get the reader to feel what I was feeling in that moment, standing on that stage and just understand how big of a deal it was for me. So that also acts as the hook because it makes the reader want to keep reading more. And I actually use this technique for 2 of my SAQs, and I do think it really helps. So when you're not sure how to start, I think setting the scene is a really good way to start, and it really just helps you think of more ideas and how else you want to frame your short answer. And so in the second paragraph, you probably noticed how I zoomed into my personal experience and like with mentioning the experiences that I went through at the competition and the skills that I built on there. So that helped answer the prompt of how I believe my experience has shaped my ability, blah, 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 learning environment. And in the last paragraph, I kind of zoom out and I focus on UT, and it's more broad now. I'm talking about what this experience and what I learned from it, like what can I take to UT. So no matter the prompt, you definitely want to focus on what you're bringing to that school near the end of your short answer. And then to answer the in and out of the classroom part of the prompt, I mentioned empowerment, hard work, and display self-understanding. So I hope that is a good example for you all. Okay, now on to your main essay or your personal statement. This essay is definitely what's going to set you apart from all other applicants. Because many people, they can get a good SAT score, have a good rank and all, but not everyone can write a really interesting and compelling essay. Because your writing is the only thing that is like fully in your hands and you can control and decide what you want to show to the university, right? So in personal statements, you have to look for examples in your life that have shaped and defined you. So by doing that, you want to pick an experience or topic that's going to set you apart from other applicants. And that's how you're going to catch the eye of the admissions team. And another thing I kind of want to say is they're really experienced. Like the admission officers are really experienced in picking out the real from the fake essays. So I wouldn't recommend trying to make up like, a bizarre story and think that it's gonna go through, because they can definitely see through that. And so with your personal statement, the biggest tip is don't try to sum up your whole life. Don't want to talk about like at age 5 I was doing this, at age 10 I was doing this. Just pick up on, a significant experience in your life and really talk about that and make it interesting. So I know a lot of you may be stuck or just, you don't know what to write about, which is totally understandable. I'm sure all of us were there at some point, us four. So here are some essay themes that may help you brainstorm and just get thinking on what to write about. So the first one is passion. You don't want to be afraid to talk about your real passion, right? A lot of people, everyone's passion is different, and don't write about something that you think the university wants to hear. Like, oh my gosh, you're so interested in, I don't know, something really, really academic when you're not. So just don't lie about it. So if playing the violin is a passion of yours, spend some time thinking about why you love playing it, what got you into it, what keeps you playing, and maybe that passion for violin created a passion for something else. So in another one of my short answers for UT, I talked about how my passion for violin from a young age, it got me interested in numbers, and I connected that to my interest in finance. So I thought that was, it's really important to, make connections with various interests that you have. And the next one is intellectual curiosity. This basically means how you think and learn. So maybe you find quantum physics interesting. So just explain why it hooks you, why you keep wanting to learn about it on a day-to-day basis, and then just dig deeper into that intellectual curiosity that you have. Okay, so the third one is identity. I think this is pretty self-explanatory, but this is just what defines you, right? And the next one is overcoming obstacles. So one main thing that I learned from this entire application process and all the writing is just don't be afraid to talk about challenges and any setbacks that you had in life, as long as you mention how you got back on your feet, because you don't want your essay to be like, oh, I had this really bad experience, and then the end. You don't talk about how you dealt with it, because that's what the university is looking for. They're looking for those traits. So if you do have any experiences that you think are important to mention that show your resilience, then this could be a theme to focus your essay on. And the last one is cultural identity. So this basically, an essay about this would express, the feeling of belonging to a particular culture. And some topics you could focus on with this theme are your nationality, any languages that you speak, location, gender, religion, and how those things kind of help define you as a person and your core values in life. So whatever theme you decide to focus on, you're going to have to explain how it is applied to your life thus far and how you use it to change your future. You really have to share your story, not anyone else's. Now, don't think that your essay can only have one theme, because when I look back at the one I wrote last year, I talked about overcoming obstacles and discovering my identity, and then also a passion. So definitely 2 to 3 themes are a good number for your essay. And if you're really confused, I would suggest making a list of experiences or moments in your life regarding each one of these themes. And that's really going to help you brainstorm and see where you want to take your essay. And on to the next one. Okay, so essay writing do's and don'ts. I'm just going to quickly talk about some of the main things for each section. So do address the prompt and tell a story. You want to open up with a hook, like I said. Write about something that's not already known. So, with your essay, talk about your journey. Don't talk about something that you've mentioned on your resume or someplace else. But with short answers, I would say expand and go into more detail about 1 or 2 things that are actually on your resume. So whether it's a leadership role or maybe a community service project or anything, just go into more detail about it and talk about how it shaped you. So I would say don't mention things on your resume in your main essay, but with short answers, that's like completely fine. just picking one thing and going into depth. Okay, the next one is be willing to talk about failure. So I think, as I mentioned before, I feel like the best stories are when people are very vulnerable and they're willing to talk about like dark times in their life, because this essay is kind of it's the only thing between you and the admissions officer, right? It's only going to be them reading it, so don't be afraid to talk about stuff like that and how it shaped you into a person. The next one is display traits like determination, resilience, and hard work. Because at the end of the day, that admissions officer is looking at what type of student they want at their university. They're going to try to understand you as a person and how you'll fit into that university and if this is the right place for you to come. And the last one I think is the most important is tie up your essay by looking towards your future. I think this is a really powerful way to end your essay. So definitely spend some time crafting the perfect end to your essay, because it is the last thing that the officer will read. And there are various ways to do this. So you can either put in a dialogue or maybe an action like, I pushed open the door and stepped inside, because just by reading that, you can tell that that student is committed and they're willing to take a risk and all. So you can also go full circle. Maybe you mentioned a quote or an object with significant meaning in the beginning of your essay, and you can refer back to that in the end. So it just goes full circle. And I think that's a nice way for the reader to, kind of end the essay and realize that, oh, I see what you did there. So yeah, definitely spend time creating a memorable beginning and ending to your essay. And on to the don'ts. Like I said, don't repeat your resume, don't lie, don't rely on spell check. You definitely want some human people, you want real people to read and give you reviews. Also, don't use big words that don't fit. A lot of people, they try to find synonyms for each word in their essay, and you definitely don't want to do that. Just be yourself, be raw. Normal words, like, you can sound put together and organized. It's, if anything, it's more truthful, right, to read. So also, one last thing, don't use overused topics to write about in your essay. Like, I'm like 100% sure every single one of us has experiences that are unique to us. I might have gone through something that no one else did. And it's not the good time to talk about, how great your mom is, or a big soccer game win or something, because that's very common and officers have read a lot about those topics anyway. So just talk about something unique to you and personal to you. Yeah.
So the last topic we're just going to briefly mention are honors programs, especially with in-state, as what I've noticed in Texas. Most majors have an honors program where kids who are, exemplary, go into. So it's not just Texas, obviously. Schools all across the nation have honors programs, and just do research on if the specific university you are applying to has one and what their specific application process is for it. And never be afraid to apply to an honors program. Like, just because you think you don't have the stats for it, or you don't think your ECs match up to some other person's ECs, like, just apply. You don't know what the admissions officer is looking for. And then something I want to just mention is UTs, just because I'm in the UTs honors program. So the specific major I have is called business honors, right? And the way business honors application works is that you apply to the Macomb School of Business, and additionally, you write a separate essay for the business honors program, right? And so in this, so both the Macomb School of Business reads your application, and so does the business honors program, and both of them have to accept you to get into the honors program. With BHP specifically, it's just an additional essay, and then if they like your application first round, then they will be moving you to an interview round. Something unique about BHP's interview is that it wasn't face-to-face. It wasn't over a Zoom call. It was literally just a phone call. And so I remember it was just me on like a Sunday afternoon sitting on my dining table for 1 hour and just talking to the interviewer on the phone. For me personally, that was more nerve-wracking just because I couldn't see their facial expressions. But just know that, you might have different types of interviews, and just be ready to, tackle all of them. With the interview, again, they ask very general questions like, why BHP? What can you bring to BHP? But also they ask unique questions like, who was your worst teacher in high school and how did you overcome the class? What was the worst moment you had and how did you overcome it? How did you be a team player? So know that they might not just ask you generic questions. They might put you on the spot. Like I remember for the high school teacher, I was like, I don't know. Like, you have to realize that you have to be quick on your feet and just come up with an answer. Don't say that you don't know the answer. Come up with something and just tell them as much as you can about yourself. So I just want to show my BHP essay, which is the additional essay that they have. I won't read it, but I just want you guys to notice that as you're reading along, like Sanemi said, even if this is a different type of SAQ, I also start off very broad. I start off talking about the business news, but then I narrow it down to me specifically and how the business news is, enforcing my need for a high quality business education. So like she said, with every SAQ, you're essentially going to start off very broad, but make sure towards the end, you're answering the prompt and you're explaining how you relate to the question that they're asking. With that concludes our webinar. Thank you all for attending. And we just want to leave you with one last note that, don't let any college decision affect how you viewed your 4 years of high school, right? Like we stated over and over again, do things that you truly enjoy and that you truly are proud that you accomplished. And whether you get accepted or rejected from a university should never take away from that, right? A college decision at the end of the day is just, one acceptance in a line of acceptances for the rest of your life. So you shouldn't make it change your opinion on yourself and whatever you have done for the 4 years. So of course, feel free to contact us if you have any questions. We will be going into the Q&A session. But of course, if you need to leave or head out, thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
To hear from you, yeah.
I quickly want to add something to what Sakshee said. Don't let, a rejection think that you're not smart enough or you're not worth, whatever adventures you're going to go on later on in your life. Don't think you're not smart enough for that college or, there's something wrong about you that they don't like. It's all just a matter about being the right fit, So I really want to emphasize that because I know even me, I was always, very nervous and I always thought, oh, I might not be good enough for this college. But if you just apply and you just put yourself out there, you never know what the wonders can be doing. There's so many things that can happen last minute. So.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sanemi, Sakshee, Vani, and Neer for all these wonderful insights. We do have a couple of questions that have come through, and any of you, please feel free to answer those questions. I am just going to ask them and you guys can unmute yourself and whoever wants to answer. So the first one we received was, how can we get teacher recommendations as a rising junior if we aren't going to get to know our teachers this school year due to online school?
I can take this one, or Sakshee, you can take it.
Yeah, you can take it. Totally.
Okay. So personally, I would think emailing your teachers is a very effective way of communicating, especially in these times. If the more you communicate and exchange emails back and forth about, these pending questions you may have that, you couldn't cover over a Zoom call by any chance, I feel like that would be a very, very great way for you to get to know them and for them to get to know you, because they'll see, oh, she's very inquisitive, he or she is very inquisitive, they really want to be able to succeed in this class, et cetera, et cetera. So the answer to that question for me would be emails. And if possible, maybe like, tutoring or like those one-on-one hours that they might have, those after school hours where you can really communicate to them how you're feeling about that class, or, what are your insecurities about, not learning enough, or et cetera, et cetera. So that's my answer to that.
Awesome. That's great. We have another one, which I know you guys covered a lot in the way you spoke, but also it was about what is a good way to get your college essays reviewed?
Right. So, like Sanemi had stated, right, talk to students that are already in college or maybe in the college that you're applying for. Obviously, your parents are like, great mentors and great influence and can influence you a lot. And like she said, English teachers can help a lot as well. And and in my case, what helped? Was that the question?
No, it was just in general. Like, how do you get your essays reviewed?
I also wanted to add that I think you should take advantage of your high school alumni, specifically maybe alumni that you know, because a lot of times with essays, if you get it reviewed from someone who isn't willing to be 100% honest on how they feel about your essays, it might not turn out the way you want it to. So for me, I had a few college alumni that are high school alumni from my school that attended the colleges I wanted to go to, and we were also very good friends. So there was no filter between our conversations. It was a very genuine process. It was like my essay was organically created, I would say, because I was able to talk to people who weren't going to hesitate before telling me something.
Awesome. Thank you. We have another one is how did you get involved with different internships, and how do you find out which one is like the perfect fit for you?
Sure. I would just like to add like one last thing about the previous question, right? There are people like college counselors. There are college counselors out there that if you're looking for guidance, you can totally reach out to someone near you that can help you out as a professional college counselor. Now we can go back to the intern question if anyone else would like to take it.
Yeah, so I would say that for internships at the beginning, for example, like 9th or 10th grade, it's honestly kind of difficult to find an internship. I would say that like you could email 100 professors in a subject that you're interested in, but maybe only 2 or 3 will reply. And out of those 2 or 3 that reply, you don't know if any of them are going to be willing to take you in their labs due to like safety reasons, due to age reasons. So I would say oftentimes it's good to take any opportunity that you can get. Don't let opportunities slip by, because just to give an example of what happened to one of my friends is that he was very interested in chemistry. So after his sophomore year, he had applied for a bunch of internships. He didn't get any. He got one dry lab internship, which essentially means he's going to be recording data conducted by other people's research. So he was basically just recording that data. It was honestly kind of like a boring internship, but he did it diligently and he did it for a whole summer. And the next summer, he was invited to an even better lab because of the recommendation he got from that dry lab internship, where he could now do a wet lab internship, which is where he's actually able to conduct experiments. He's actually able to record data, and he's not just on an Excel document, finding trends and whatnot. So it sort of builds on top of each other. So I wouldn't let opportunities slip by because it's like boring or uninteresting, because you don't know what that could culminate in the next year.
Okay, we have another question, and it is it worthwhile to ask your mentor for a rec letter or a recommendation letter?
Mentor in what case? What do they mean?
That's the question we've received. I would assume it is somebody whom you're mentoring. As a college counselor, I would like to answer that and say, look at what the requirements of the colleges are. The colleges may sometimes ask you for one teacher recommendation, one counselor recommendation. If it is a teacher recommendation, you really want to go with your core classes teacher at your high school. If there are additional recommendations that you need, then definitely you can ask for a mentor or a coach who has been helping you. But first, always go with what the colleges are requiring. And students, you guys can also answer if anybody wants to answer.
Yeah, for sure. I think with teacher recs, Jigisha has said, focus on someone that can help and benefit your application as a whole. Um, Maybe if the mentor knows you very well and you think that they can add something to your application, totally go for it. If not, then I mean, totally up to you.
Okay. We have another one which says, how significant are AP exam scores for college applications?
Can answer that. Like Sakshi said in the chat, there was also a question about it. I mean, to stress about AP exams, I don't think I would hold them higher in importance, like compared to the SAT or the ACT. But if you're really if you're really about transferring those credits in, getting credit for those classes in college, then I would really recommend, working on them. But I don't think you should sacrifice that time for your SATs or your ACTs, and especially your PSAT, because PSAT is quite important, like you could get into the top for the National Merit Scholarship Program. I would really emphasize on those three tests that you should really focus your time on. For AP exams, yes, like I said before, if you're really, about getting the credit for those classes in college, then you should definitely, take whatever you can.
Yeah, and just to add to that, AP scores, they have like little to no value of whether you'll be accepted into the institution. Obviously, they're looking for at least, well, honestly, they really don't have any value whether you'll be accepted. It's at the end, it's just for college credit. Yeah. So don't worry about if you have like bad scores and how that might affect your acceptance. It probably won't.
Yeah, I don't think the score itself matters. I think it's more if they look at your transcript and they see that you're taking, rigorous classes, then that benefits. But you honestly will be submitting your AP scores after you get into the university.
Great, thank you guys. And then we have another question. And I know since you all have such a variety of colleges that you applied to, the question was, can we apply to more than one major in your application for a particular university?
So usually some of the universities that you are going to be applying to, they usually have like a backup major option. I know in some Apply Texas applications that I filled out, I was able to choose a backup major just in case I wasn't able to get into my first major. And that was usually it. You would only get like that as your backup option. So in this case, you would have two majors that you could select. One would be your first preference, and then this other one would be your backup if you didn't get it. Same goes for minors. You could have, they gave you options for two minors, and I had one, there was one option for certificates. So usually they don't ask you more than two majors. But I mean, you never know. This year's upcoming applications could really change things.
And just one last thing is if there are special programs that if you're looking to combine business and engineering or something else, there are special programs that you can apply to, or if you go to a university, you can probably double major into two majors once you get into the university.
Awesome. We have another question. It's about transcripts. For the school transcripts, do students need to wait to submit the college applications until they get the summer courses included in the transcripts?
So for that one, I would recommend you being very in touch with your counselor and your counselors who are in charge of Naviance and everything. Because for me, I use Naviance for requesting transcripts and remaining in touch with my counselor about when I should be sending them and everything. Because normally what happens is that if you kind of plan things on your own about when you should be sending your transcripts in, you could all of a sudden get like a new update from the school that, hey, we're planning to include this in your transcripts, so don't request anything yet. Or, there could be a mess up with the system, etc. So I would say that remain very close in contact and be updated with your counselors, because they're, in the end, they're the ones that are guiding you to how you can submit your applications for college. And so I would recommend using them as your resource for transcripts.
I would also like to add over here that in case of your transcripts, you can always request an unofficial transcript for your own records to see how the transcript is looking. And most colleges, they're going to allow you to self-report what your grades are, what your scores are, and you can send in a mid-year transcript and attach it to your application. So you really don't need to wait till you have the actual transcript, because most colleges will let you upload your mid-year transcript or a mid-year report. Okay, we have another question. Are there any benefits of having a minor with a business major?
You can get, I mean, it all depends on the person. I think, in my opinion, if you want to get a minor in or liberal arts, you sure can. But it all depends on the person and what field you're looking to go into later on.
Yeah, like Sakshi said, I wouldn't just get a minor to get a minor, but like focus on your interests and how you think you can combine that with the business education.
Yeah, and I think if you are not, like, because some honors programs, what they have is that they have a double major, and if you're not able to get into one of those honors programs, then you could really use, like you could really do with a major and a minor, because if you're majoring in, let's just say, finance, right? Then you can minor in something that, you were really interested in, but, that's not in the business school. So like you can major in, you can minor in like a liberal arts program, some study related to humanities, anything. I would say keeping your scope broad, but at the same time kind of narrow. It all depends on the person, like Sakshi said. There are some people who like to use their major as a broad topic, right? And then they like to minor in something that's like a subset of that major. So like, for example, finance and accounting, they go hand in hand. Why? Because you use accounting in finance and vice versa. There's always some finance involved in accounting. So either you could, have your minor be a subset of your major, or they can be totally like two different things, because you have two different interests. It's all up to you. And I would say to keep your options open, keep a very open mind, because when you get into that college, chances are you might not like that minor, or chances are that you might find a new minor that, you never knew about, you never knew existed. There's always new options out there. And I think it's very beneficial for you to have a minor with your major.
Awesome. Great. We have one last question. This will be the last one. How much does GPA matter to colleges? So we had a student who said he's taking engineering and it's not beneficial to rank. He's getting an A, but is it still considered a 4.0?
Yeah, so it actually depends on what your school's grading system is also like, because there are some schools that have all their classes based on a 4.0 scale, and then there's some like schools that have their grading scale based on. My school was based on a 5.0, which means that, my any AP classes that I was taking was out of a 5, on that grading scale point. So I would say to be updated, like I mentioned in the chat, I answered that question actually. And I would say to be updated with your college's requirements, so that that staying above like, that specific number will help you keep in track with, keeping your GPA up.
I'll just like to add something to that, to Vani, what you said is, whatever your school's grading system is, just remember one thing, that colleges will most likely always recalculate the GPA based on their requirements. So it does not matter whether your school has a pass fail, whether it has a letter grade, whether it has a 4.0 scale, 6.0 scale, 8.0 scale, or a 100-point scale. Colleges will most likely recalculate the GPAs based on, maybe they may just take the core classes or they may consider all your classes. So it's always going to be dependent on the college that you're applying to. Neer, I think you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that a GPA isn't sort of like a self-standing number. Like I would say, there's a reason why they also look at things such as course load, why they look at things such as class rank, your standardized testing scores. These are all sort of part of that package. So if you feel like your GPA is sort of weak, but like your class rank makes up for it, or you've been consistently taking very hard classes at your schools, or maybe your school is like a highly ranked academic school known for being like very rigorous, those sorts of things will probably be taken into some sort of consideration.
Okay, we just received one more question. Is weighted GPA more important than unweighted GPA?
Auntie, can we make this the last question?
Yes, this will be the last question.
So I think Jigishanti sort of just answered that when she said that colleges recalculate based on whatever their own personal preferences for GPA scale. For some colleges, that might be your unweighted GPA. For some colleges, it might be your weighted GPA. Like, for example, my school evaluated out of a 100-point scale, but I'm pretty sure a few colleges only asked for my 4.0 GPA. A few colleges asked me to specify how my school ranks students and then tell them what my GPA was. So it sort of depends on the college.
Awesome. Thank you, kids, so much. I think you guys did an amazing job summing everything up. Any last thoughts? Any parting thoughts?
No, just thank you everyone for joining. We hope that we were able to, spread some knowledge and our experience on whatever we learned over the past year, and that we know you all will be successful in, however you guys go about either your high school career or your college applications. And please email us if you have any questions, and we will be sending in the PowerPoint presentation. We will be sending in the PowerPoint presentation in the email.